One of my viewers asked me if I could help with specifying when to check blind spots. Hello, I was hoping you could please help me with when specifically you need to check your blind spot and if there's a list. I understand doing one when overtaking parked cars, moving away from stationary, changing lanes and doing a full check when reversing, but I'm receiving conflicting information from family, friends, Google who say your blind spot needs to be checked every time you perform a turn and when you pull over to the curb, such as in the left something behind exercise. However, I had a lesson with an instructor who advised you don't need to check the blind spot when turning or when going to the curb, and I haven't seen it done in these videos. My dad sent me this from what Google says. You need to do a head check looking over your shoulder in Western Australia for safety when your vehicle's path's changing, such as when you're changing lanes, merging, leaving or returning to the curb or reversing. A head check is also crucial before turning left to look for pedestrians, cyclists and motorcyclists in your blind spot. I also had a friend fail as they turned that didn't see a cyclist in their blind spot. Would you only do it if there's a bike lane? It's completely normal to be a little bit confused about, conflicting information out there, what your friends say, what your parents say, what Google says. It's all well meant, but there's obviously lack of consistency in what people say. In this video, I'll explain it logically exactly how I do it in my one-on-one driving lessons. You only check your blind spot when something can realistically be there. Other times, the mirror check routine is usually enough. So in other words, just when it makes sense based on how traffic moves. So if you're moving in the same direction as a vehicle that's potentially traveling next to you on either right or left side, logically you would check the blind spot to see if there's something hidden outside the frame of your mirrors. We logically check the blind spot before we diverge over to the next lane or if we merge. By the way, the timing is very important, which I cover in a lot of my other videos. I'll link some in the description of this video. When you're pulling out from a stationary position, you will have to first check if anyone's overtaking you. If not, you can then indicate right and look over your shoulder. It is necessary and in your driving test mandatory logically to look over your shoulder before you pull out, but not when you're pulling up next to the curb. So if you indicate left, and let's say that you indicated about 3 to 5 seconds, it was blinking for about 5 seconds, and you check the mirror a few times while it's blinking, and you haven't overtaken any cyclists or anyone, there's, no logic in, looking over your shoulder to pull up next to the curb like 3 inches from the curb. So it's unnecessary. So yes, you do indicate and mirror and blind spot as you're pulling out, but not when you're pulling up on the side of the road before you start to do your exercise, left some behind in your driving test. So that is unnecessary. So your instructor was right. So when you're turning right or turning left in most situations, you shouldn't. And when you are pulling over, you shouldn't check your blind spot. The mirror routine is sufficient. Leaving the curb, changing lanes, merging, overtaking parked vehicles, check the blind spot because there's a realistic chance that something's going to be there. Even U-turns, hook turns. So when you are turning at a sharp angle, your blind spots evolve a lot quicker because, once you occupy the position sort of to hook outwards to open up an angle, your blind spot just prior to turning right will be on your right side. So to do that is absolutely necessary. And do combine your blind spots with mirror check, proper mirror checks. Any movement where you are entering the space that might already be taken by another vehicle requires your blind spot check. It makes sense, doesn't it? Even if there's a slip lane, you forgot to change lanes in time or to enter the slip lane as soon as it started, somebody could be there. So if you missed it by 10, 15 meters, another vehicle could have occupied that space there. So unless you've gone right into the beginning of the slip lane, you would have to check the blind spot. For example, if you didn't know you were turning and then all of a sudden you remembered, I've got to turn there. So these would be true and logical blind spot events. Hey, but what about if you're turning right or left? This is where a lot of people get confused. So if you're turning right and if you're turning right from your designated lane in Australia and there's no lane next to you traveling side by side, there's no point checking your blind spot. So once again, the mirror check routine is enough. Just make sure if you're turning right from a double turning lane, for example, you're in the left turning lane, turning right, and both of those lanes are designated turning lanes. You shouldn't be changing lanes in those situations, only in an emergency. So if there's an emergency, you would still have to check the blind spot. So for a normal legal turn, when you're turning right, if there's no lane turning, and traveling in the same direction next to you, proper mirror checks when you're approaching the turn and just prior to turning is more than sufficient. Turning left, this one causes a lot of confusion. First of all, bikes. Always check for cyclists. Always check for cyclists. But sometimes you've got to ask yourself, which one? And if you're asking me, what do you mean, which one? Well, if you haven't overtaken one in the last 30 seconds and you're driving 60 kilometers an hour, approaching the turn, reducing your speed in the last 20, 30 meters, and check your mirrors properly, how could anything slip your eye? Pedestrians. Well, there are situations where you have to check for pedestrians, and there are situations where you have to check for cyclists. Now, if you overtook a cyclist and your speed wasn't consistent, there were roadworks or something, so you were slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, and you lost the perspective of, the cyclists that you overtook a few times, and they appear and, disappear out of your peripheral vision. So, of course, before you turn left, you would look over your shoulder if you can't see him around, so it might be hidden outside a frame of the mirror, of all of your mirrors for that matter. However, there are situations, especially in the city areas, which I'm going to demonstrate a little bit later on, where there's dedicated cyclist lanes travelling straight ahead or turning left. They're usually painted green, and if you're turning left at the traffic lights and there are cyclists frequently, which you can expect in the busy, inner city areas, if they're riding straight through, you have to check the blind spot and give way to them if necessary. See, there's a green cyclist strip here. The reason I brought you here to show this cyclist lane on the left side there, see it's divided, with curb, so the cars don't, potentially accidentally go in that lane. As you can tell, the drivers from the car park can cross it, but they've got to give way to cyclists. If a cyclist went straight and I was turning left here, I would have to look over my shoulder. But now that I knew that I haven't overtaken one single cyclist, there was no point checking the blind spot in this particular scenario. So it comes down to your situational awareness that can't be memorized. You have to learn it. You have to go through as many situations as possible, supervised ideally, and learn from that. For pedestrians can be in your blind spots. But if you're traveling straight ahead, you would only give way to pedestrians when you're turning and if they are in front of you, if you can see them in your peripheral vision in front of you, including your side windows, okay? But if a pedestrian's already behind you, you're not supposed to stop and negotiate with them. You would check them specifically when you're reversing. This driver, the guy in the Tesla that's reversing, they should look around, their blind spots to see if there are pedestrians in their blind spots. It'll be a simple assumption that there could be something, coming. Now, we've got a solid, unbroken white line. So I'm going to wait for the Tesla driver who should be a little bit more versatile, given that he's got a lot of, bells and whistles in that Tesla. See, this guy almost stepped out in front of me, but look, I slowed down. He saw me, I saw that he wasn't intoxicated. For that reason, I didn't do much about it other than just slowing down a little bit. Any turning vehicle should give way to pedestrians if they are turning, especially in the area, dense with pedestrians, like, here in Northbridge. And this is where you learn, you have to come to, you have to put yourself in situations where you don't feel comfortable, but specifically supervise, See, this driver should give way to those people on the left. Every single decision you make comes from what you see. You must have heard the expression, oh, it came out of nowhere. Nothing comes out of nowhere. It's just that you didn't look. So you have to prioritize proper checks, and nothing will ever come out of nowhere. Why your friend failed for not seeing a cyclist? I believe the cyclist was legitimately in the blind spot. So I can only speculate because I didn't see the situation, but I don't believe the assessor had any other option but to intervene. Think of your blind spots checking as response to a potential risk. Leaving the curb would be same logic. If you are stationary, if someone's travelling at 50 kilometres an hour, surely if you pull out at the same time, they might potentially cut you off or, sideswipe you. Just to summarise it, if somebody could realistically be by your side, in your blind spot, do check. If you're turning right and you are in the right lane, there could be no object that's moving in the same direction as you, or you are, on a two-way road. The mirror check is sufficient. So you shouldn't check the blind spot. Sometimes people ask me, well, does it hurt if I do it anyway? No, it doesn't. But the problem is, at least in the driving test environment, the assessor will potentially think that you are unaware of what's going on. Are you aware of your obligations? You're checking your blind spot. You indicated 5 seconds before. You checked your mirror a few times and you still don't know if there's somebody potentially driving side by side to you on the right side. It shouldn't be the case.